Yesterday, a resident of Residency Novum suffered serious injuries after sleeping outside a lift due to a slippery floor allegedly caused by cleaning works. The incident raised an important legal question: who should be held responsible for ensuring the safety of lawful visitors? These were precisely the issues considered by the court in Suraya binti Mustafa and Perbadanan Pengurusan Residency Novum and others. Thank you. Good day to our lecturer. Today we will be presenting a comparative case review of Suraya binti Mustafa and Dirt and Ribbon Estates, showing why operational control matters more than property ownership. Occupiers liability requires those with practical control over a space to protect visitors from foreseeable harm. This duty tracks real-world management, meaning multiple occupiers can share liability concurrently. Malaysia has no specific statute for occupiers liability. Under the Civil Law Act 1956, our courts rely entirely on English common law, negligence principles, and also judicial precedents. We contrast two cases where in Suraya, a resident slipped and fell in a common lobby, resulting in a shared liability across three corporate occupiers. In Dot, a landlord escaped liability because control was contractually transferred via a lease. Our report analyzes both cases across all core elements of tort. Our objective is to prove that where operational control exists, liability follows. But without control, liability fails. I will hand over to my teammate. Thank you.
Moving into section of legal principles of occupiers liability, Malaysia lacks a specific statute for occupiers liability. Under the Civil Law Act 1956, our courts rely on common law negligence and English precedents. Following Lord Denning's landmark ruling in Witt v. Laken, an occupier is simply anyone exercising a sufficient degree of control over a premises. This control does not require exclusive ownership. It is a shared scope that tracks who has the practical authority to maintain the property or manage its activities. Next, common law divides entrants into categories to define the occupier's scope of duty. Because the plaintiff in Suraya was a resident, using the common lift lobby as intended, she was classified as a lawful visitor. This status triggered a standard duty of care, requiring the occupiers to take a reasonable, proactive step to keep the premises safe from unusual or hidden dangers.
First, I will discuss the scope of duty of care and the meaning of reasonable care. Once occupier status is established, a legal duty arises to ensure that lawful visitors are reasonably safe while using the premises. This duty exists because the occupier has sufficient control over the premises and is therefore responsible for managing potential risks. However, the law does not impose strict liability. An occupier is not automatically liable simply because an accident occurs. Instead, the court will assess whether the occupier acted reasonably in the circumstances. This brings us to the concept of reasonable care. Reasonable care does not have a fixed definition and depends on the facts of each case. So, courts generally consider factors such as the nature of the premises, the likelihood of the harm, and the seriousness of the potential injury. In practice, occupiers are expected to take sensible precautions to reduce foreseeable risks and ensure visitor safety. Next, I will discuss unusual and concealed dangers. Not every danger on a premise is treated the same way by the law. A key distinction is between obvious risks and concealed hazards. Obvious dangers can generally be recognized through ordinary observation, meaning visitors are expected to take some responsibility for their own safety. However, concealed dangers are different because a visitor may be exposed to a risk without realizing that it exists. As a result, occupiers may be required to take greater precautions, such as providing adequate warnings, restricting access, or removing hazard where possible. The more concealed the danger, the stronger the expectation that precautionary measures should be taken. This principle can be seen in Suraya binti Mustafa and Perbadanan Pengurusan Residency Novum and others, where the court considered whether sufficient measures had been taken to address a hazardous condition on the premises.
Moving into section 4, we apply these principles directly to Suraya. First, because the plaintiff was a resident using a common lift lobby as intended, the court easily classified her as a lawful visitor, fully entitled to a safe environment. For occupier status, the court looked past formal ownership and found that three separate defendants concurrently held control over the premises, creating shared liability. D1, the management corporation, held overall structural and managerial control. D2, the property manager exercised daily supervisory control over maintenance schedules and also contractors. D3, the cleaning contractor maintained immediate operational control over the physical activity that created the hazard. Because all three parties at the same time held the functional power to minimize the risk, the court correctly held them jointly liable as multiple occupiers. Next, we examine the danger and the resulting breach. The hazard was an oily, slippery surface left by a stainless steel polish spray. Because residents expect safe footing exiting a lift, this unsignposted floor was classified as an unusual and concealed danger. The defendants breached their duty by failing to implement safe cleaning procedures. They kept a high-traffic lobby open during chemical polishing without using warning signs or physical barriers. These oversights directly caused the fall, resulting in physical injuries that are a highly foreseeable harm on an unmanaged slippery surface. Crucially, the court ruled that D1 and D2 owed a non-eligible duty as they could not escape liability by simply blaming an independent contractor. The court also rejected all defenses. Contributory negligence failed because the plaintiff used the walkway normally and could not see the hidden oil. Voluntary non-fit injuria was rejected because she never knowingly or voluntarily agreed to an unwarned hazard. As a result, all three defendants were held fully liable. I will now pass to my teammate for the comparative analysis. Thank you.
Moving to section 5, this comparison shows that control is the key element in occupiers liability. Property ownership alone does not automatically create liability. In Soraya, liability was imposed because all three defendants had joint control over the premises. Defendant 1 controlled the building, Defendant 2 supervised daily operations, and Defendant 3 handled the cleaning process. Since they could prevent the danger, they owed a duty of care. In contrast, in DOD, the landlord escaped liability because control over the staircase had been transferred to the tenant through the lease agreement. Therefore, no duty of care arose. Overall, both cases shows that where control exists, liability may arise, but where control is absent, liability cannot be established. Thank you. I will now pass to my teammate for the final conclusion.
Moving to section 6, we evaluate these doctrines. First, while multi-layered property management can create overlapping duties, the control test remains highly valuable due to its flexibility. By prioritizing real-world functional management over formal titles, it ensures liability tracks a party's actual capacity to prevent harm. Next, holding management bodies liable for contractor faults might seem harsh. However, this non-delegable duty represents a measured policy decision to prioritize public safety over fault allocation. It protects lawful visitors who cannot see internal corporate contracts and forces occupiers to actively police their grounds. Finally, DOT highlights the crucial limits of this doctrine. The law strictly refuses to hold owners liable where control has been contractually transferred via a lease. Ultimately, control acts as a crucial double-edged sword. It serves as the gateway to hold negligent managers responsible, while acting as a legal shield to prevent false blame. I will now pass to my teammate for the final conclusion. Thank you.
The comparison between Soraya and DOT confirms that practical operational control is the true basis of occupiers liability. Legal duty follows a strict formula where occupier status creates a duty of care and liability triggers when a party fails to take reasonable precautions against foreseeable hazards. In Soraya, the court flexibly distributed concurrent liability across managerial, supervisory, and operational layers because each party retained the capacity to prevent the hidden oily danger. Conversely, DOT demonstrates that a complete contractual transfer of possession via a lease agreement eliminates a landlord's control, acting as an absolute barrier to liability. Ultimately, these cases show that liability strictly tracks the functional power to manage risk and also protect lawful visitors. That's all from us. Thank you so much.